So some companies know that people love the sound of tube amps, but love the convenience of digital. So they put both of them into one format, which we call a hybrid amplifier. Here's the cool thing about hybrid amplifier. They either have the solid state or tube section of one of the favorite amps that is out there, but they have this DSP or digital component to it for effects like delays and reverb, etc. Fast forward in 15 years, you come in with your hybrid amp and perhaps a mid-60s Fender amplifier. You put both on the amp tech's desk so that they can have a look at it. The 1960s amp most likely is going to be easier to service than your hybrid, because what if the hybrid has some kind of proprietary DSP chip in there that is no longer being made, hasn't been made in 15 years? Super hard to find and costly. The hybrid amp is also probably going to be running on certain firmwares just to make sure that it's still debugged and fully functional. But in 15 years, the cables needed to connect your amp to a computer might not be available anymore. Those cables keep changing all the time, and the used ones are kind of hit or miss. There's also maybe some kind of issue with the software. You need to go into the software and do a deep dive to figure out what's going on. Same issue. Cables, the software might not be compatible with future computers. So those are things to think about. What if they have to change the entire PCB? Are they commonly available? Can they be easily found? And if they are easily found, how expensive are they? And then you have surface mount PCBs that are difficult to work on. Will someone in the future want to bother working on those kind of amplifiers? So if you really think about it, some of the modern amplifiers that are being built are kind of solving issues for right now, but what they're not really solving is how easily they are going to be fixed. So obsolescence is almost built into some of the newer technologies, which really sucks because it's that kind of thing that prevents guys like me from going all in on digital. More on that later. Now, everything I talked about is my perspective, the things I could come up with. I'm sure if we open this dialogue, which I hope happens here, you have maybe a different take on this. Maybe you've found solutions that are going to be so much smarter than everything I'm going to be talking about right now. Maybe there are concerns that I'm having right now that could be proven to be irrelevant in the future. I'm not a know-it-all. I'm just opening up a conversation that I hope hits home with you and that we can go back and forth and talk about this and maybe consider what the future looks like, whether it's bleak or there's actually a net positive at the end. One of the things that I think is starting to get embedded into our workflow is AI. Love it or hate it, it's here to stay. If we take all the collective knowledge about amp repair, all the symptoms that are out there, is it possible to build an agent or multiple agents that could take all the information from the techs that are still around, that are willing to share this information, and archive as much knowledge as possible? One of the ways to do it, obviously, if you don't want to go the AI route, would be to build courses. So someone who's an amp tech who wants to impart this knowledge could make multiple videos, maybe subscribership kind of thing. You pay every month, and there are one-on-ones and consulting with up-and-coming techs. I'm sure there's a bunch of ideas here that would make a whole lot of sense. But we could also archive all this knowledge. So maybe you could create some kind of AI assistant that would help you troubleshoot stuff like symptoms based on certain diagnostics, voltage interpretation. You would have maybe the failure probability mapping just to make sure that you understand the circuit properly and what could potentially happen. What about hum? Hum isn't the same across the board. Sometimes hum can be indicative of maybe a transformer or maybe bad tubes or some leaky component in the amplifier. What about crackle? Not all crackle is the same. Sometimes you have crackle that comes from the tube, but sometimes it's not tube related. What could it be? What if you have some weird type of oscillation, which was the case with that Gibson amp? It had this very specific oscillation, low volume. It wasn't dependent on the volume of the amp. I had no clue what it could be. Brought it in, got it fixed. The oscillation was gone. How about cold solder joints? I'm really bad at soldering, and sometimes I try to solder components together and I mess it up. So someone who doesn't know that is learning soldering and has no clue that what they're looking at is a bad solder joint. How about burnt traces? Stuff like, I don't know, someone tried to mod the amplifier and they modded it in the wrong way. They did something bad. They didn't put the right values, and now the amp doesn't work properly or doesn't sound properly. So you could have some visual diagnostic. You could have diagnostic based on certain sounds, finding the right way to maybe record those sounds, having them as a reference. And then there's also the whole knowledge preservation. You could read a schematic on something, but if you don't know what the issue is and how to spot it and go troubleshoot it, then the schematic can only do so much for you. So AI could be a solution. I think online courses could be a solution. Another way to pass down this information is for up-and-coming techs to have someone that can come in via maybe camera and do some kind of consulting to help them troubleshoot certain things. So retirees who are looking for some kind of revenue could start consulting with up-and-coming techs. And these are just like quick, like I jolted these ideas down on paper. There's no real thought. I didn't go super deep on it. I'm sure someone could say, hey, how about this or that, and find different solutions. But if we talk about it, at least we can have some kind of open option for the future for people who are interested in becoming amp techs. We just need to start talking about it so we can explore those solutions moving forward.